Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. No pressure at all. Heavy hitter. All right. Thank you for having me at the conference. It's a real pleasure for me to be here for the first time in Australia. So had lots of friends in Vancouver, obviously. Everyone from Australia seems to be interested in Vancouver, especially Whistler. So apparently we have snow, something you don't have. Anyway, so it's really nice to finally get down here and meet everyone here and help out. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. That I've been programming for actually a long time, and it was only until it wasn't until 2008 when I started to really grasp the true nature of information systems. So there's been a few talks at this conference that kind of raised eyebrows and really challenged people. So I hope I can do the same for you, and hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes of 5 or 10 minutes of time at the end to get to your questions. But of course, if you catch me in between sessions or after the conference, I'm happy to answer any more questions that you have. So. I'm the founder and CEO of Adaptec Group. I vowed at one point to never write software without events ever again. And so that's what I did. And so hopefully you will raise your eyebrows as to some of the discoveries that I made along the way. And hopefully that'll inspire you to challenge yourself and your teams and how you run your projects and learn something from that. So one of those realizations was that we're actually in a very small blink of time in the history of information systems. We've had information systems for thousands of years. That's how civilization has started. And so, yeah, we didn't need computers. We didn't need all this stuff. And there's some fundamental things that we dropped along the way. If you've seen my other presentations, it kind of goes into how Moore's law applies a little bit differently to networking, to storage versus just sheer computing power. And I think those inequalities kind of did have a negative effect on how we treated information systems in those initial years. And I think we're still stuck in those ruts in some cases, and such as premature optimization for storage and other things. Yeah, and so I'm not going to go into all of this. It's more of a introduction. I have some discoveries. I wanted this talk to be kind of done from another angle, from an angle of, wow, look at what we're doing because of this. I don't want to get into the technicalities of how you do event modeling. I think it's really easy to find out how do you do event modeling. You go to eventmodeling.org and you do the 7 steps, and that's it. But to look at it from the other perspective of what you actually get at the end of doing this for a number of years, I think that'll be a little bit more interesting. And so it's the first time I'm presenting the topic from this angle. So blueprints, that's another thing that we had. When we build things as humans, we used blueprints. And right now we're in a world of agile for most places. And the word blueprint isn't used too often. We're more about feedback loops and things like that. So I challenged myself to see how I could make software development and information system automation more like an engineering discipline you'd find in other aspects of our world. Even though we've kind of been learning that software isn't like building a bridge, well, it's still expensive. And so that still does hold true. So yeah, we need to look at some things with blueprints. We can minimize some of the rework and queuing. I hope you're reading. I'm not going to be repeating a lot of this stuff. These are just kind of areas for you to consider as I'm talking about the general concept. So, and design. The idea that we can actually have a vision as to what we're going to build instead of just reactively keep pulling from a backlog, intentionally collaborate on something where our entire organization can be aligned. I think those are some of the things that we were missing in this industry. So these are the kind of the 3 cornerstones of what drove me to continue to build systems a specific way, because I found about 100 problems of software development went away by looking at these previous 3 slides. So what is event modeling? Again, I'm just going to spend just a very small amount of time talking about the actual technicalities of what this is. But it's very simple. It's essentially a storyboard for your system. If you're building a new one, it would be a storyboard that would describe using the system over time, maybe a year or whatever time frame you want. It would show all the UX components, how people interact with the system. It would do it all by example, so it would be data that would show you how things change. It would show you how many systems there are. There's swim lanes at the bottom. Shows you input and output points, more correctly referred to as where you change the state of the system and where you view the state of the system, those are the blue and green boxes. And there's a single way that they're all connected. This is an older diagram. It's from where we did a lot of shorthand, so you'll notice one of the rules, if you're keen on this subject, you'll notice one of the rules is broken, but that's for when you're doing this physically with sticky notes on a wall. You might want to take some shortcuts. So what's the best thing that happened to us? There you go, your memes. You like memes, I heard, so I threw in a few. We removed 90% of all meetings. And we were going faster, surprise, surprise. So that kind of taught us that this is all about effective communication and how much of it we didn't have. It's about this broken telephone, which is the other meme on the other side, where we're addicted to this idea that we did our part and just hand off the ball to the next person. The idea of collaboration isn't very popular, unfortunately. In some places it is. In most places where people want to collaborate a lot, you have ceilings and boundaries and silos where you're restricted. But as an organization that's fairly flat and can grow sideways very quickly because of design, we didn't have these problems. And hence, yeah, we don't really have any meetings. What we found that this type of collaboration was really the common place for communication to occur, the common ground between business and technical people doing the implementation or security or anything. And at the core of that is an event. And what is an event? An event is a fact. These are pieces of information. So I keep going back to saying that we're not programming, we're not doing anything exciting. It's just the last 50 years of thousands of years of information systems. So information's the real backbone of everything we're doing. So this alignment meant that everyone is pulling together in the same direction. That's that design part. Understanding that you're not at odds with the next department over, that there's a wall of a silo that's broken because you're now forced to work with those people. You've actually reduced the feedback loop so tight that it actually disappeared because you're collaborating. There's no need for feedback. So it's post-agile. Sometimes we say this is post-agile because I don't even need a feedback loop. But wait, how are you going to get feedback? It's real time. I don't need feedback. We're working on this together. Our hands are on the design at the same time. Why would you need feedback? So we don't have stand-ups. There's absolutely no need for us to have them. We do have them with our clients because they have their own internal processes, and we're not going to go in there and drop a bomb on their organization and destroy whatever they built. But when we're working on projects, there's simply no need for a stand-up. We look at an event model in Miro. We see which parts have a red comment, meaning that it's blocked. There's a question about something. You can put someone's name in there. It alerts them in their email or whatever they have done for their notifications. It's done faster than stand-ups. This actually happens in real time. Our planning meetings are gone. We look at what we decided to build first. Just draw a rectangle. We're going to focus on this part. That meeting's now useless. Change management. I can look at a version A, version B of the event model. I can see exactly what has to be thrown away, rewritten, written anew. I see exactly what the scope is. We don't have Jira or any issue trackers. We haven't used them for 7 years since the company started. Our clients might, and we can plug into those things, but there's no need for them, at least not to prioritize work. We might use one for something that's in production to actually be a bug tracker, because that's what they were designed to do, track bugs, and that's it. And one of the interesting things that that's kind of controversial is that we noticed how much rework we remove from the process of delivering automated information systems, because we're working off a blueprint, so guess what? We kind of know what's going to happen. But this is really what's going on in most software projects. It ends in a death march, right? Your first week or 2 weeks or a month, oh, wow, you're slinging those features out, sometimes 2 a day, right? It's amazing. You walk in that same room 6 months later, and people are at each other's throats, and nothing's getting done for weeks on end. Why? There is no design, and that forces rework, and that does not scale. That's got a horrible big O notation for budgets. So the idea that you're refactoring as part of your TDD is really scoped. That nasty curve is caused by that rework. So as you can see, the last feature, G here, actually pulls in a lot of stuff you already did. You're like, oh, that one extra field, holy smokes, that touches about 5 different things I did at the very beginning of the project. And as time goes by and the project grows with complexity, you have more and more potential of this. This is the death curve. So if you do design, part of TDD is to design. I mean, you'd actually probably find a lot of literature out there that says that testing is not the primary purpose of test-driven development, even though it's called test-driven development. It is to have design through something called emergent design, because as you're keeping things minimal, magically the best minimal solution will pop out without your subjective influence of it. Well, everyone's different, right? So what kind of solution are you going to get when you have like 10 people working on it, each one doing this type of thing? You're going to have 10 different mindsets moving forward. That's not a very good way to design a system. So this actually limits the scope of test-driven development. If you're going to do test-driven development, we actually don't do it anymore, not at least by that definition. If you're doing test-driven development with a fully designed system like this, and you'll see some of the ways that it's actually designed and taken apart, is that you have something that TDD doesn't ever advise you on, and that's scope. When you say go refactor as your red-green refactor cycle, there's never been any documentation on what the scope of that is. It's like anything's up for grabs. So you sometimes have people that go and excuse gold plating as part of the refactor cycle. Did you need to do that extract method there? I don't know. Sounds very subjective to me. So test first and test after kind of replaced TDD for us. And we removed all types of tests except for actual unit tests. We don't do any integration tests. They don't exist. They're not needed. The way that you get insight into how a long-running workflow went, or a long-running piece of processing ended up taking over an extended amount of steps, is through yet another projection that we'll learn. We also don't do any behavior-driven development frameworks. I used to be a big fan of BDD. I did a whole bunch of Cucumber and all sorts of other frameworks. Huge fan, but I was not enjoying being that guy holding on, making sure that those templates were updated as new abstractions were thought of by both business and that, and this shaky bridge between the two was always something that really strained me to try and do that. I saw the intentions, like, yes, if we can just write things that it sounds like it's English or whatever your language is, and then there's this thing that maps that over with those fields, filled in with example data, that's gonna feed a real test that a developer is gonna use, that's gonna be awesome. Sounded really good, I bought it. And so I suffered for quite a while. Our specifications are always by example. This goes back to Eric Evans and DDD. There is no better specification than one that shows you actual use. Because we're using events, we can paint any picture. The top row there is your typical given when then. Given some events happen in history, when I try to do something to the system, I know that I did it because a new event appears. That's the other orange box there. And likewise, if I'm looking at something in the system, maybe it's a screen of available products I'd like to buy. How do those products get there? Well, something's happened in the system, so I have given when then without the when, because there's no action. I have given a few things that have happened, then I see that these products show up on my screen. Very simple. So another concept is the idea of, and this is really important actually, something called information completeness. And this rescued the largest project I ever worked on. It was a trading company that did the trading for Fortune 50 companies from Reebok to Procter & Gamble. And they had a rewrite of a system that was Windows-based, and they needed to do this in web-based modern technologies. They had 2 restarts, and they were at the risk of losing the entire business to some other platform. Because once Procter & Gamble goes, then so does Reebok, so does this other, and so on. And so I flew into Boston from Vancouver for 2 days of, let's just say, high pressure. We were locked in a conference room for 2 days with everyone that was everyone from directors all the way down to testers and developers, and how do we fix this? And fortunately, the CTO at the time, I knew, and that's why he knew what I was doing, and said, we need to see if event modeling will fix this. And some interesting lessons from that. Those misaligned rails there is exactly what happened. They didn't have an account for what happens to each of the 300 plus fields on the New York Stock Exchange's API for when you want to put in an order. Information completeness means that you know where every piece of information comes from and where it goes. And until they knew that, they had restarts. And that was one of the biggest takeaways. The other one has to do with that given when then scenario. Some people said that you can't fix this problem with sticky notes. I'm a Harvard educated guy, that kind of thing. Really big company, lots of highly paid folks, obviously smart. But we, second day for 45 minutes, I stood in front of the whiteboard with one of them and said, okay, show me the worst part that's always gonna fail. And we stood there for 45 minutes going through every single possible scenario that he could think of that was the biggest problem with the system. And after we were done, he had nothing left to say, and it was solved. Because we worked by example, we worked with a complete system, and that project is live, and that company as well. So there's a lot of interesting ideas that happened from this. So we fully understand coupling, and we understand what it means when your boss swings around to your desk and says, just add this one more field on this page, and not a big change, right? And then you can go off onto your weekend. So I don't know who's seen this Rick and Morty episode. Just a real quick adventure. In and out, 10 minutes. Not a problem, right? And so here you are, thinking you'd be spending another 5 minutes or 10 minutes on that Friday afternoon. And at the bottom, that's your Saturday night or Sunday morning. As you pull the thread of where that one little change to that one text field that you're doing your boss a favor for leads to. Or worse yet, this is your colleagues next week with the side effects. So how do we do all this? Well, we realize that there's only 2 to 4 patterns to do any information system. There's no crazy adapter pattern, there's no observer, who made these things up? It's like bedtime stories, right? Like, how many times are you gonna write yet another insurance company? How many times are you gonna write another point of sale system? Are all of these things different? Yeah, they're different like snowflakes, but they're all made out of H2O. So we kind of got what it is, and that's state change or state view. Those are the unique things about every system. And it gave us a way to not rely on Googling everything. I'd rather someone look at the previous usage of that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 patterns, copy it from the same solution, and go on and get on with it. Right? But yeah, you don't want people copying the questions from Stack Overflow. That's the wrong part to copy from. And yes, we do want to do awesome things like domain-driven design. And Eric Evans and Martin Fowler and lots of other people put in a lot of time and effort and work into these bodies of knowledge. But when you have to deliver something in 6 months, you don't have time to teach those people everything. So I want understanding of domain-driven design for free. I don't want to pay any price for it. That's kind of what we did. So what are the effects of having a proper bounded context? What are the effects of having anti-corruption layers? What are the effects of having an aggregate that behaves properly and has a nice transactional boundary? Do we get the same thing if we do this? The answer was yes. We could come in from the goal side of those best practices, hexagonal architecture, onion architecture. We could come in from the end goal and make the connection eventually, not at the expense of our timelines. So I'm not going to beat up anyone for learning DDD, and I'm sure we've been there. I mean, who's had brown bag lunch things at their work to get everyone to be in the upper 50% of that, right? How many hours do we waste forcing people? Like, come on, get in there, learn with us. You can lead a horse to water, right? We don't need to worry about sagas or coordinators or any of these patterns. In event sourcing and CQRS and event-driven architecture, there's a lot of this middleware type of architectural pattern distraction, I call it now. I think there are important things to learn about, that you kind of have to think about coordinating 2 different services, but we don't need them. It's yet another projection of state. It fits the 2 patterns, the 2 to 4 patterns. So why would you add a superfluous pattern?